applicant because he's asking as to where it is.
Okay. Just setting it up. Right, it's running live. I'll send the link through to him now, Chair.
Swen. Yn da a croeso I gyfarfod i'r pwyllgor craffu dysgu a sgileddau heddiw. Welcome to today's meeting of the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee, where we will be having for the first time full translation service. My apologies for the slight delay, but this is the first time we've used Zoom in this way, and hopefully any teething problems on today's meeting will be the last that we see. Just move on to the formalities. First of all, do I have any apologies for absence for today's meeting?
No, Chair.
No apologies. In which case, can I move on to any declarations of interest that people have? No declarations of interest. And finally, can I move on to receive any disclosures of prohibited party whips in accordance with section 78.3 of the Local Government Measure 2011. Has anyone received such a whip? Thank you. In which case, I move on to the sole item of business that we have for this meeting, which is the call-in of the Cabinet decision for the creation of an all-through school merging Llanfair Coronian CP School and Coronian High School. To give you some background, the reason I issued a call-in was that as part of the transformation process, we had agreed a procedure as to when proposals would come to scrutiny to be looked at and evaluated as being after the consultation but before the statutory notice. In this case, because of demands over COVID and workload, that was missed by all concerned. So having had the decision at Cabinet, I received a number of representations from members of the committee about issues that they would have raised at a scrutiny meeting, which may or may not have influenced the outcome, but which I felt it was important should have been heard. Therefore, I used my discretion as chair of the committee to bring forward a call-in request based on those issues and the fact that the procedures agreed had not been followed. That was approved by the monitoring officer, and we've arranged the meeting for today as the earliest possible opportunity to hear this call-in and undertake the scrutiny that we would have undertaken previously. At the end of the meeting, the results of the scrutiny session will go back to Cabinet as a formal scrutiny report for them to consider. With that ado, can I now pass to officers to introduce this section, unless Councillor Phil, there's anything you want to come in first on?
Thank you, Chair. As you just touched on, really, it's a call in on the decision of the Llanfair Coronian CP and Coronian High School to an all-age school proposal. It is unfortunate that this turn of events has happened, but it's understandable based on the pressures between the officers within the council, and it is a genuine mistake and something that we'd always like to obviously have had the opportunity for scrutiny to have covered this paper previously. Obviously, it's been well known that the consultation was there, and I welcome today's interaction with all of you. So thank you. Marianne or Emma, do we want to go briefly through the high level of the paper for scrutiny, colleagues? Thank you.
If you could, please.
Councillor Pete, could I just check, are you referring to, in respect of high level for the paper, the matters raised in the call-in or the matters in the recommendations in the specific cabinet report?
I'm looking to treat this as if you were coming to scrutiny before cabinet, to deal with this as if it were coming as a formal item of scrutiny.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Are you, oh, sorry, Marianne, I got two screens on go. Okay, do you want to go there, Marianne? It's fine.
Fine, okay,
Chair,
thank you.
Chair, can I just raise an issue? There is a difference between an ordinary scrutiny process and a call-in process. And the call-in process is set out in Rule 736(7) of the Constitution clearly says, and I read out for you, if having considered the decision, the scrutiny committee remains concerned about the decision, then the committee may refer it back to the decision-making body for reconsideration. So that's what the scrutiny process is about. It's not a normal scrutiny process. It's about the issues for the call-in. And I thought I'd just make that clear, Chair.
Okay, thank you. But the issue that you approved for the call-in was that a property scrutiny committee hadn't taken place.
That's the reason, that's the procedural reason for it, but this is a call-in process, if you see what I mean. That's the breach of procedure, but the process is about considering what the decision is and whether the matter should be reconsidered by the committee as a result of the concerns which have been raised as part of the call-in.
Chair?
Go ahead, Emma.
As what I could do is take the matters of the call-in section by section and give a response against those ahead of any questions, if that's helpful.
That would be helpful, yes.
Okay, so bear with me. So within the call-in paper that we received, it refers to section 2.5 of the decision document, restates the strategic aim of Powys County Council to improve access to Welsh medium provision across all key stages. The decision category does not achieve this aim as it substitutes definitive actions with vague promises to possibly consult on such issues sometime in the future. Section 3.5, and is a repetition of unfulfilled promises given our decades. The decision is therefore contrary to the policy framework of the council. So in response to that point, the proposal that was before cabinet was actually to establish a dual stream all age school in Llanfyr, and it is not a proposal on the language category of the all age school. The decision is therefore not contrary to the public framework of the council. The next part of the call-in was in respect to the, according to the current Welsh in Education Strategic Plan, and is quoted, early feasibility work carried out by PCC has identified Newtown or Welsh Pool, and then the narrative continues. Well, this is actually, in response to that matter, this is actually incorrect interpretation of paragraph 3.4 of the Cabinet report, which states the following. Whilst not a formal part of the proposal, a number of respondents took the opportunity to comment on the Council's approach to developing Welsh medium provision at Corinion, and it must be noted that there was a strong response in favour of establishing designated Welsh medium provision to serve Llanfyr Corinion / Severn Valley area, as well as criticism of the Council for the lack of progress over the years. So the paragraph stated to serve the Llanfyr Corinion Severn Valley area, not created in the Severn Valley. And paragraph 3.5 within the Cabinet report went on to explain how the Council intends to address this. And so I quote, in order to address this issue, the Council will accelerate the dialogue with representatives of the two schools and the community to explore ways to develop and enhance the Welsh medium provision in Llanfyr Corinion, and will also include all feeder schools in this dialogue. The next component of the call-in referred to the strategy referencing, and it said reference in section 2 of the decision document did follow extensive engagement. However, scrutiny of this ensuing decision has been deficient with regard to the remit given to officers not to consider any options that could reduce the number of centres providing secondary education in Powys. So our response to this element is that Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee did consider a report outlining the detail of the programme and each work stream on the 22nd of June 2020. And the strategic aim to develop a network of all age schools based around the 13 current secondary schools was based on extensive modelling, which included options for reducing the number of secondary schools in Powys. And the modelling was scrutinised by an external company, and that modelling, as you know, Chair, we discussed with yourself informally. The next part of the call-in is in respect to the consultation. So I won't read that out in detail because I'm conscious I'm taking the time, but it was in respect to the consultation. So our response to this is that information about the consultation went to the following schools. So I'll list those, and all schools had the opportunity to respond to the consultation: Ysgol Cwmbanwy, Castle Crinion, Church in Wales School, Myford CP School, Ysgol Pont Robert, Ysgol Rhywbrechan, Ysgol David Lloyd, Ysgol Gymraeg y Trallwng, Llanfair CP School, and Ysgol y Chwarae Cyrrainian. So according to the Welsh Government School Organisation Code, there is no requirement for proposers to hold consultation meetings. PCC has taken the approach of holding consultation meetings with schools named in a proposal and not with other schools. And each response to a consultation is treated as a single response. So there is no evidence in Ysgol Gymraeg y Trallwng's response that the response is based on findings of a parental survey. The online form includes the following question: do you agree with the proposal, with the option to state yes, no, don't know? And this provides an indication of the level of support, opposition, but a decision isn't predicated on this. The purpose of a consultation report is to summarise each of the issues raised by consultees, responding to these by means of clarification, so amendment to the proposal or rejection of the concerns with supporting reasons, setting out Estin's response to the consultation in full, and responding to Estin's response by means of clarification, amendment to the proposal or rejection of the concerns with supporting reasons. And Cabinet did consider all those issues raised and the authority's response to all those issues raised within the formal report, and that formal consultation report has to be published. The next matter raised in the call-in on consultation report, it states the consultation report documents several response opinions about the extent of Welsh and English medium provision in the high school, which are factually incorrect. And whilst it was necessary to record such received responses, the report should have been clear about such inaccuracies, which present a very misleading account of reality. This is a failure in the consultation procedure, making an objective decision impossible, thus satisfying condition 7.36.3.2. But actually the consultation report did include the opinions of consultees, and those were noted and were responded to within that report. There's reference in the call-in to the financial strategy, but our response to this is that the consultation did not exceed the saving of £11,994 from this amalgamation. There was very little additional cost to this consultation other than staff time, and 2 hard copies of the consultation document were printed and posted. So we're talking a few pounds there. And whilst it's anticipated that the implementation of this proposal would result in a small saving to the council per annum, the proposal is not solely based on financial drivers. So the aim of the proposal is to improve educational opportunities for learners in Llanfair Cyrrainian. Then finally, the call-in referred to aspects of the Future Generations Act. And our response to this is that the proposal is to establish a new all-age school in Cyrrainian. The consultation document clearly states that the council recognises the strength of Welsh medium provision in the Cyrrainian area, and that the Welsh medium provision at Cyrrainian High School is central to the council's aspiration to provide access to enhanced Welsh medium secondary provision. The council's intention is to take this forward using a phased approach, with continued dialogue with representatives of the 2 schools and the community to explore ways to develop and enhance the Welsh medium provision in Llanfair Cyrrainian. If the outcome of this is the need to change the school's language category, a further statutory process would be required to implement this. So, Chair, that's I very quickly have run through the points that were raised in the call-in, listening to the monitoring officer's views earlier, and then our response to those matters that have been raised in the call-in. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Emma. I'm thinking on my feet here because I had misunderstood the nature of today's business, because I'd understood it that the fact that scrutiny had not been undertaken was the reason the call-in was approved, and therefore we would be undertaking full scrutiny now, not that we would be solely addressing the issues that were raised to me by a member of the committee. I'm going to move with that, though, at this stage, and invite questions based around what has been submitted with reference back to the papers that have been submitted and your comments. So if people would like to use the raise hand facility, which will be at the bottom of your main screen, I will take questions. I'll take Councillor Lucy first and then Councillor Bren. You're mute, Lucy.
It may be that this question is deemed invalid, in which case I accept that, because it is really about the wider process. Just that the proposal to me doesn't, there are so many claims within the consultation document that don't seem to stand up, and it doesn't, the proposal doesn't seem in any way to address the policy, that the changes to get to the to resolve the large number of small schools, the decreasing population, decreasing pupil numbers, and the building condition issues. None of that seems to be addressed within this proposal. So that's a major concern of mine, apart from the Welsh language issues. You know, it talks about improving curriculum opportunities, but how is it going to improve curriculum opportunities? There's nothing in the document that seems to address that, nor how it improves the facilities available to pupils within that catchment. So that's my much broader concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. That does touch on the future wellbeing element of the call-in request. So Emma, if you can focus just on the wellbeing element, future wellbeing element, are you able to respond to that? Geraint is possible.
Shall I come in on that?
Yeah.
The issue around the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is, you know, it's several layers to that, but the most fundamental that we would need to address at this point is that every school in Powys is able to make progress with the development of the new curriculum. And there's the all-age school network for Wales. One of the positives that they're quite a cohesive network. One of the big positives that they are talking about at the moment is the strength that this brings to planning the new curriculum, because it pulls together teachers across the two phases who will be required to plan that and transition over to that, which is hopefully the new curriculum itself has the future of well-being of future generations built into it as one of the ambitions that it is supposed to address.
Thanks for that, Geraint. You touch on an interesting point there, in that we have a school being developed that, by the paperwork here, is a 50-50 split English to Welsh. So how will the curriculum be able to be met fully within that environment, bearing in mind the very small numbers of high school pupils that you will have in both languages? Surely there's going to be a substantially reduced curriculum choice relative to a larger school in the immediate area, Welshpool, for example.
So do you want me to to address that, this is a challenge around all of our current secondary sites. We have 13 sites under 11 governing bodies, and the strategic decision taken last April was to build the future school community around those. They're not to be built in isolation around them. And when I say build, I don't refer there to capital projects. We're referring to establishing the schools as the way they intended to continue. But the level of collaboration is in a different place. And the issue around choice, the key issue around choice happens at the age of 14, and it happens again at the age of 16. And that is subject to current extensive discussions across the board. I'm not entirely sure that the parameters here. Do you mind if I just to say, the Chief Legal Officer, if he's to advise whether, I'm not sure how the questions are supposed to be responded to, given the parameters that we were given at the beginning there. But I'm giving you an honest answer around the issue of choice. The challenge there around funding choices post 14, and that's part of an ongoing dialogue across the authority, and again post 16, and there'll be proposals. We've already committed to bringing forward papers for wider discussion on post 16 way forward, and that'll be a matter for scrutiny pretty soon, I think, in terms of the way things are emerging, because the head teachers are working on it.
Thank you for that, Geraint. Councillor Bryn, and then I think Councillor Sandra was trying to come in via the chat.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr iawn. Dwi'n ddiolchgar iawn bod deulydd portffolio'n croesawu craffu ar yr achos yma, ac gan bod nhw'n croesawu craffu ar yr achos yma, dwi'n meddwl dylai craffu digwydd, achos do'n y cyfaddau mae dim ond camgymeriad llwyr oedd bod craffu heb ddigwydd yn barod, a dwi'n meddwl ar lles democratiaeth yn gyffredinol, mae o'n gwbl naturiol a gwbl gywir dylai craffu o'r achos yma ddigwydd. So diolch yn iawn i'r deulydd portffolio addysg am ei eiriau doeth ar y dechrau. Y cwestiwn sgynna i yn dechrau, na i dyfynnu o'r strategaeth ar gyfer trawsnewid addysg yn Powys. Mae'n ddrwg gen i mae'r dyfyniad yma dim ond yn Saesneg, ond one of our aims is to develop a network of all-age schools based around the 13 current secondary school locations. A mae hwnna'n rhan creiddiol o'r dogfen sydd o'n blaen yn ni. Fysach chi'n hoffi esbonio ystyr a network of all-age schools ar egwyddorion addysgiadol ac neu cyllidol sydd yn sail i'r cynllun yma. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Bryn. I think that question is pretty much directed at the strategy rather than the actual paper that we've got in front of us, isn't it? Rather than the Llanber Grynion all school age paper. I mean, going back to the strategy, I think, you know, the actual wording in the strategy, I've got it here open on one of the many screens. Let me just click to it. You know, the purpose of this aim is to ensure that early years provision, primary, special and secondary schools are configured to work in ways that will ensure a coherent and inspiring learning journey for all learners in Powys. This reconfiguration, mindful of both efficiency and equity, will enable school leaders and teachers to prioritise the learning and well-being of our children and their colleagues, for those schools to be considered amongst the best in Wales. So that's the strategy. But in terms of that network of schools, it's to try and ensure that we have an equity through Powys, and obviously this is where we'd like to get to, and this is one step, and this is a small step in terms of the Llanber Grynion catchment area. I know Councillor Lucy asked about the small schools in the area. That, you know, there is a huge amount of consultation that would have to happen, and you know that there's a programme that will that they will come into a discussion further down the line as well. I mean, this decision is something that has been discussed in the locality at length for many years. So this is just something that's moving that forward and actually embracing the school wanting to move that forward. I think there are.
Ydyn ni'n anelu at wneud pob un ysgol uwchradd yn Powys yn rhan o ysgol gydol oed?
Well, if you read the strategy that we went through in April, there is a intention to establish 11 new all-age schools by 2030. So obviously that is in the strategy that was published in April and that was scrutinised last June. You know, I'm not saying, but there's a lot of information here that we're not concentrating on the paper of Llanfa, but we're actually concentrating on the strategy. You know, that there was some time ago now. So I think as
Phil,
you know, in terms of Wales. Sorry, Chair.
Can I help you here, Phil? We have got a strategy that has been adopted by Cabinet by virtue of leader approval. I mean, and yes, I fully identify and personally endorse the all-through school concept. I'm interested to understand how the development of this all-through school benefits the development of that strategy, other than the fact that it meets that strategy, in terms of the broader context of not just the all-through schools, but the developing on the language continuum, bearing in mind that it is taken in isolation from the rest of the catchment of the school.
I think that the fact is that this decision was the tail end of many years of discussion, and the school and the school community had moved along with the wider community to agree to this step forward. You know, that this was the school pushing for this step, rather, you know, as happened in Llanfyllin with an all-through school there, and as had happened in Llanidloes with the federation there. You know, I don't think any of them are potentially at the end of their journey yet. So it's a case of working with communities to get to somewhere where we would like to be. You know, I think the actual issue that we're talking about here isn't Welsh language in Llanfyllin, it's Welsh language in the Severn Valley. So, you know, that is not what this paper is. This paper is not resolving Welsh language in the Severn Valley, and it's never been designed to do that.
Yeah.
Bryn, before you come back in, Marianne's been trying to get in, and she may have an answer to your question.
Yeah, but just yn sydyn iawn, chi'n dweud bod y cais yma wedi dod gan cymuned ysgol Llanfair, ond ydy'r tystiolaeth o'r ymgynghoriad ddim yn dweud hynny. Dim ond 52% oedd isio i'r ddwy ysgol uno, ac oedd 40% isio i Gyngor Sir Powys edrych am syniadau eraill. So, does dim ffordd o ddeud bod y gymuned o gwmpas Llanfair Creinion hyd yn oed o blaid y cynllun yma.
Like come in? Neu ddod mewn.
You come in, Marianne.
Okay. Cwpl o atebion y cwestiynau fyna. I fynd nôl i'r cwestiwn ynglyn â ydyn ni'n cynnwys ysgolion cynradd y dalgylch mewn yn yr ysgol pob oed. Bod gyda ni nod o ddatblygu ysgolion pob oed ar draws y sir, y peth pwysig yw bod ni'n ystyried bod pob un dalgylch yn wahanol, ac mwyn gallu creu yr ysgol pob oed sy'n siwtio'r ardal yna, mae rhaid ni'n edrych yn ofalus ar beth yw'r sefyllfa o ran yr ysgolion, beth yw natur yr ardal ac yn y blaen yn y dalgylch. Mae dalgylch Cerinion yn dalgylch sydd yn cynnwys nifer ysgolion gwahanol, ysgolion bach, ysgolion Cymraeg, ysgolion Saesneg, ysgolion dwy ffrwd, ysgolion eglwys, ysgolion cymuned. Felly mae'n ardal lle mae yna gymhlethdodau o ran natur yr ysgolion cynradd. Dyn hynna mae'n gweud byddwn ni ddim yn edrych ar rheini eto wrth symud ymlaen, ond mae rhaid i bethau digwydd yn ôl, wel, yn ei hamser. Byddwn ni'n cynllunio ar gyfer hynny eto. Dyna un cwestiwn. Beth oedd y cwestiwn arall, Bryn?
Does ddim tystiolaeth bod yna unrhyw gefnogaeth i'r cynnig yma yn dalgylch Llanfair ei hun. Maen nhw wedi cael gofyn, ydych chi o blaid un o'r ddwy ysgol, does dim cynnig arall wedi cael ei roi ger i bron nhw, a mae bron, tua hanner yn nhw wedi dweud, o iawn te. Mae bron i hanner wedi gofyn, mae eisiau syniadau gwell ac amgen i'r darpariaeth yn yr ardal yma. Ac mae yna gosodiad o wnaed gynharach bod y darpariaeth yn dda ar gyfer y Gymraeg yn Llanfair. Ac mae'r dystiolaeth ydy nad ydy o ddim yn dda. Bod o ddim hyd yn oed yn prin iawn, bod o'n 2C heb sôn am y 2B mae'n honni fod yn y ddogfennau sydd wedi cael ei rhoi ger bron y gyhoedd.
O ran natur ymgynghoriad, fel oedd Emma wedi sôn eisoes, y peth pwysig mewn pan dyn ni'n dod â adroddiadau ymgynghoriad yn ôl i cabinet yw bod materion sy'n cael eu codi yn yr ymgynghoriad yn cael eu cyflwyno'n glir i cabinet ac yn ymatebion swyddogion. Dydy'r canrannau o blaid ac yn erbyn, bod nhw jyst yn dangos sut mae bobl yn teimlo, ac efallai dydy'r canran nas ymateb o 110 ddim yn fawr iawn. Mae'n dangos sut mae rheina'n sydd wedi ymateb yn teimlo am y cynnig, ond dydyn hynny ddim yn golygu bod y cabinet yn gorfod mynd gyda'r rhai sydd wedi nodi i ymrwymiad un ffordd neu'r llall. Mae jyst yn dangos lefel o blaid a lefel yn erbyn. Felly, peth pwysig mewn ymgynghoriad yw bod y materion sy'n cael eu codi yna i cabinet i weld, a dwi'n meddwl o ran yr adroddiad yma, mae'r nifer fawr o sylwadau ynglyn â'r cyfrwng Gymraeg wedi dod trwyddo ac mae rheini wedi cael ei ymateb iddo. Felly oedd yn hollol glir i cabinet beth oedd y teimladau rheini oedd wedi ymateb.
Okay, dwi'n ymwybodol...
Bryn,
Yeah, I was just going to say, Pete, I'll leave some others to come in, but I do need to come back as soon as possible. Diolch.
Thanks, Bryn. Can I remind people to try to keep very tight to the notice of the call-in? I'll give a degree of latitude, but we were stretching it a little bit on that one. Councillor Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I put my question in the chat, but I'm not sure if everybody can see it. And regarding accuracy, it does state in the Cabinet paper that the Cabinet relates to the 12th of January 2020. Now, reading that, I'm assuming it meant, a misprint or something, and it should be 2021 that the paper refers to. And if that's the case, for accuracy, where is that clarified? Because, in future years, somebody can look at this and think, what on earth is going on with the wrong year? So that's my first question. And could I have an answer to that first, please?
It'll be clarified when we go back to Cabinet following this scrutiny session.
Right, okay, thank you. So that's good. I appreciate that. I have got a number of questions, but I'm not clear now of whether I'm allowed to ask them or whether they're relevant or not. But one thing I do remember reading is value for money in the document. And if we're having consultation, I've heard what has been said, trying to listen very carefully. It's already been stated that the document has gone out for the merger of the primary and the high school, and I appreciate that. But individuals in the locality seem to have picked on this as an opportunity to discuss the Welsh language, which again, I appreciate. And, if we're looking for value for money, and if a period of time has been put for officers, etc., to do that piece of work, and people are coming back and saying, why don't we look at this in the bigger round? Why was not that taken up? Both these schools are in a bad condition. It will be necessary somewhere along the line to look at having a better building. And if you're going to have a better building, I'm not sure of the geography of the area, but I do know that down in the Estragunais area, quite a large geographical area was considered. And as we know, Marianne, there was 12 primary schools that were under discussion. They all went. They were all closed for one reason or another, irrespective of the condition, etc. And the one high school is the feeder school. Apart from Welsh language, obviously, which is in Slovera. But this is a golden opportunity as far as I can see. Why are we wasting time, money and effort to have a piecemeal consultation? Because this will have to be revisited in the not too distant future. So why not do what we've been told and get on with the job and face reality? And go out, as has been suggested, have the right consultation with all the public to say, what is the future for Welsh language in the whole of the locality. Thank you.
I'll come in.
Yes, please, Marianne.
Okay, just to say we decided to take a phased response here, bearing in mind that we have had consultations in this area over the number of years around the Welsh language. And we felt we needed to establish the all-through school. And as the consultation document and all the cabinet papers clearly said, Llanfagreinion schools and this all-age development is central to our thinking about developing Welsh medium education for the northeast of the county. But we would need very careful dialogue with the schools and the community there. But if we then decide to bring back a proposal to cabinet, that would be then subject to a further statutory proposal. We just decided this one needed, because of the sensitivities surrounding it, it needed a staged process, and I think that's clear in the cabinet reports.
To clarify, what you're saying is that this will allow development to move forward in the area, so that there will be progress towards a final structure. But that this doesn't preclude any other changes in the area, either to the linguistic categorization of the school, or even potentially, if you were to go down that route, the existence of the school as part of a wider review of primary education within the catchment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well put,
Okay,
Chair.
I think
can I
that's
just come
helpful.
in quickly on that? Any school's decision doesn't then preclude it from further development or further involvement in the future transformation of education strategy. But none of this. It would be great to go on a Powys-wide transformation capital bid where we do spend the full £500 million. But I'm speaking to a group of councillors and colleagues who are all affiliated to certain groups that are slamming us at the minute for potentially trying to bite off more than we can chew. What we are trying to do is make sure that every decision that we do make is costed and is effective and is the right decision for many generations. I mean, I do think recently some of the capital investment in the Gwynedd area, we have too many primary schools, even though we've just gone through transformation. That is clear now from projected pupil numbers. They're fantastic facilities, and the offer there is what it should be, but we can't afford to make these mistakes again. This was a community that was willing to go with us and move forward on that transformation journey, and it is part of a journey. You don't just click your fingers and expect this to happen overnight. This isn't going to happen in this administration. This isn't going to happen over the next 2 administrations. The transformation will have to continuously evolve, and we need to work together to get there. Welsh language is key, not just in this Llanfagreinion proposal, but for the whole of the Severn Valley. I represent Blaen Hafryn, right down the bottom of Ysgol Dyffryn Trannan. I want to make sure we make the right decisions for the learners that go there in terms of the future of Welsh language for them. So it's not something that we can just bolt on to the backside of an existing consultation. It's something that needs to be appropriate for future for all learners. And that I think there are agendas here, Chair, and I'm going to be quite open about it, of trying to pull something out of this that it isn't. This is a discussion over the fact that a school is moving forward along a transformation journey. Every catchment within Powys needs transformation, and we have set out a vision to do that over the next 10 years, which will involve other administrations. And I think previously to this meeting, Scrutiny have been very positive and supportive of that, and it'd be a shame to lose some of that support, because I think officers have a huge amount of work in front of them, and bearing in mind COVID has been in and with us for the last 12 months now. I think we've actually done quite a lot in them 12 months, but for a community to come with us and actually willingly move along this journey, without the huge amounts of work that would take from officers as well, we are seeing progress, and I don't think that should be lost either. And we are talking about school communities here that are key to this, and I welcome the commitment from the governing bodies in both the high school and primary school in Llanfair. I'm not trying to babble on, take up all the time, but this is frustrating, and I didn't want this job to be frustrating. That we're supposed to be working together here for the same aims, and we are all committed to improving the Welsh language offer across Powys. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor
Sorry.
Phil. I think that's a helpful clarification, because we've seen in other documents a statement that this decision doesn't preclude other decisions in the future, but that was missing from this one. And
Sorry.
I think there was a concern that that may be used by other people further down the line to justify not going down routes that might open up that we don't know about at the moment. Councillor Sandra, you wanted to come back in, I think.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's what I was trying to say. I appreciate the work that has gone into this, and that was my concern, because we are all very much aware of COVID and how people are or are not working at this present time. But we have had, inspections of our education system. It has been stated we have too many primary schools. We know full well, it says in the document, that we have a number of small primary schools, which, and as far as the amount of children that are in those schools, there's no equality, or equity rather, with the amounts of money per head per child. You take the largest school and the smallest school, and you look at the amount per child on that, on that goes into that school. If it's a big school or a small school, they are not equitable. And this is a golden opportunity for Powys. I thought transformation was the true sense of the word. Officers' time has been taken up. It's admirable that the two schools are wishing to merge, and I realise that there's a road running through the two schools, and that is dividing them, and those are challenges that will have to be looked at to be overcome. But what I'm saying is, and I don't want to undermine Scrutiny or the officers' work or anything, I'm just saying this is a golden opportunity missed, because why not put it all into one and look at it as a whole? That's all I'm saying. Why just look at a piecemeal of it? Because those people that are going through this process of consultation now, they'll be faced with consultation in the next round, and people can be consulted out in this, because they'll be consulted on this, on that, and the other, and in the end they say, oh, what do they want to do now? So, if we are going to do it, grab the nettle, pull it up, and do it all together in one. And that's what I'm saying. Why wasn't it looked at in the round in the beginning? That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Sandra, I would love to do that. We have a number of papers that are coming to you now which are targeting some of our smaller schools in terms of the cost and the equity across the country. The county rather. This isn't about the quality of the education that is in each area. We need equity. We can't continue to fund schools, some to the tune of 11,919 circa pounds per pupil, and when that is comparable with others that are close to 3,000, and some of them in the areas that you represent. I would love to bring a paper where we get from the current estate of 96 circa schools to the 50 that we can sustain. And I would love to do that all in one hit, but it's just not possible. That we just don't have the resource. There are a number of small schools proposals that I hope to bring before you as Scrutiny, and get the support that you've just shown there for each one of them to move it along, so we can build 13 equitable catchment areas where the offer for Welsh language, special educational needs, additional learning needs is offered across the county, and the investment that needs to go into each area to ensure that can happen. And that's got nothing to do with politics or colours. That's what we're all here for. That and it can't happen soon enough. We're 20 years, 30 years too late on this. 1970 was, Llanidloes High School was built in the 50s. 70s was one of the high schools. We didn't open a school for nearly 50 years. That's appalling. We should be ashamed of ourselves as an authority. What's gone on? That isn't officers. That's politicians that have got in the way of that. I'm sorry. We can't let that happen again. We need to be working towards a better future for everybody. Excuse me, frog in my throat.
I think we can all endorse what you're saying there, Phil. I think there is an urgent need for transformation, and I think there is.
Well, let us do it then. The frustration. We're frustrated. The officers are frustrated. We're here today discussing this. We know what the frustration is. We get that, but we've had to prepare for this meeting that should have happened. Granted, should have already happened. There's no disagreement with that. That's a genuine mistake that was not of anybody's making. These happen, but we welcome this. But it's support to ensure transformation can happen. The number of officers that are on this call today would have been a damn sight better well spent if they'd have been spending the time on them transformation projects that we've got going ahead. I do completely understand the frustrations that we aren't moving quick enough in some of these areas. Welsh language in the Severn Valley, as a representative of the Severn Valley myself, it needs to happen, and we need a future for it, and it can't happen quick enough. Sorry, Chair.
I think we're in agreement there, and there are papers coming forward, and the reassurance that the decisions around this school means that doesn't mean that things are being excluded from the Welsh language Severn Valley proposal is a reassurance that is warmly welcomed. I am keen for us to focus back on what we are actually talking about, which is the merger of these two schools. We have gone slightly wider. I'm aware, Geraint, that you have been trying to come in for a little while. How is that still an indication you wish to, or have things been dealt with by your colleagues?
No, I'll say it very briefly. I think what this has helpfully pulled out, frustrations or not, is that transformation ultimately is about the learner experience, the entitlement that they have, the way that we deliver from the classroom, the opportunities that we have. We've got 21st century schools, which is an investment plan. And then we have transformation, which is sometimes incorporates a massive investment plan, but we need to be absolutely clear, it doesn't always need to do that. There are things we can do incrementally that are not about costs. They're not about the pound. They're about getting structures in place that help us develop future leaders in education, develop the curriculum as children grow through and as teachers grow in the profession. And I think this has probably helpfully drawn that out today, that we need can't always be fixated on the multi-million pounds. There's so much else to the narrative, and it's not a waste of time if we can create structures that make it more easy to get on with those other bits of helping move children's education along. And a school doesn't need to be in a good place or a bad place to be subject to transformation. Transformation is the journey that everybody is trying to be on in a century that was in danger of leaving us behind if we didn't get on to that. And I think this has helpfully unpicked that. And I think making sure that we are always clear about what we're trying to do is the ambition that we need to be. The Ystrad Gynllais project was in today's money, a multi-million pound project. The benefits are clear. The head teachers at every meeting make sure we know that. That's the ambition for each part of Powys, but sometimes we will latch on to an organisational change which will predate the ability of the council. As Councillor Phil said, it's not just this council, there's a future cabinet, a cabinet after that. They're going to have to grapple with education transformation. And if we can keep everybody on the same page about what we're aspiring to, we can get there. And I think there's so many agendas. Let's grab them when we can. When the opportunity is there, let's do it, bank it, and then be able to build on it. And I think that's what essentially this proposal is about.
Thank you, Geraint. Bryn, I can see you want to come back. I want to bring a couple of other people in first, and then I'll come back to you. Angela?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I've been listening to everything, obviously read all the papers, and I am a little bit disappointed by some of the tone we're hearing here today. I think it goes without saying that every member of this committee and the officers that we work with on a regular basis are very passionate about ensuring what the offer is to children in Powys is that they can have the best quality of education in the language of their choice. And I think that's what the ultimate aim is here. And we've heard the word transformation probably 1,000 times here now in the last hour, but I'm getting some contradiction about what we mean by that. So I think from what I'm hearing that what we're saying is that we currently have 13 sites, 11 governing bodies, high schools, and that's going to stay. Fine, fair enough if that's a long-term decision. But basically, I just want to know from the officers, because I understand we cannot transform the whole of Powys in one go. That would be too much work for anybody and too much money, and that's impossible. But if we are to do it in stages, are they 100% confident that those stages do fit in to the bigger plan? So we're not looking at each stage in silo. And that's what I would like to hear, that I would like the confidence that this isn't just one piece of jigsaw thrown on the floor, picked up and dealt with, that it's part of the bigger picture to get to that end goal.
Should I come in? I think that was directed at the
Yeah, Emma, that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. We are working to delivering the strategy, and we're clear about that. And the order in which we work at, there are some things that we need to do in a certain order to unlock opportunities further on. But yeah, absolutely committed to delivering that strategy, and this is just one component of it.
Thank you. I'm pleased to hear that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Emma. I'm going to come in with a question now, and it relates to the consultation aspect of this. Looking through the responses from student school council elements, there's the concern expressed by pupils themselves that pupils from other schools coming in who are not part of the all through school may have problems adapting. I'm interested in the consultation element and you mentioned that schools were contacted, but I'm wondering in these times of Teams meetings, whether there is scope when we're looking at similar proposals in the future for you to hold a meeting that gives a briefing and a chance for input for governors from other schools within a high school's catchment, so that you've essentially got a cluster meeting that any governor can attend and can add their contribution in the same way as you have with the governors of the two specific schools concerned. Because obviously in creating an all-through school, you're creating an environment that is very positive in terms for transition for the pupils going from that particular primary, but equally one that may provide additional challenges for pupils that are coming in from primaries around.
I think on that matter, Councillor Peake, consultation is open to anybody, regardless of role, location, it's general public consultation. But I do hear what you're saying in respect of the informal, I suppose, in engagement. Obviously, we wouldn't have the capacity to hold individual meetings with all feeder schools, but the same as we do an informal meeting with the chair of governor and governors and the head teacher for particular schools on proposals, we could explore the opportunity of one informal session for feeder schools, if that makes sense. We've got to work out the timing because these matters are sensitive, as you can imagine. We want them to be inclusive, so we would need to take that away and look at how we would do it. But the consultation is for anybody to respond. But I appreciate what you're saying.
I think my point would be that in a pre-COVID world, there would be a public meeting that you would all attend and address, which would be advertised quite widely and all and sundry would, with an interest, would drop into. I think I'm essentially asking for that type of meeting to be held online and made available with specific invites going out to the governing bodies of other feeder schools within the catchment, just to extend and improve the inclusivity, but also potentially to throw up ideas that might not have been picked up on with just the local input.
Yeah, we can look at holding a session with the wider governing bodies. I just need to look at where that falls and talk that through with Marianne and the lawyers in terms of following the code as well, because obviously there are some sensitivities with some proposals for particular staffing groups in certain schools, so we just got to be mindful of those as well. But I do hear what you're saying. Yeah,
I think staffing issues are taken as read, and the school code as well has to be adhered to. It's just looking at trying to avoid potential the local rumour mill and the local gossip mill, potentially undermining future proposals in the area.
Thanks, Councillor Pete.
Bryn, you're still looking to come back in?
Yeah, okay, diolch yn fawr iawn. Gwneud dau sylw I wneud a cwestiwn I ddilyn. Ac un sylw ychwanegol gyda llaw. Dwi'n gwerthfawrogi bod hwn yn cymryd amser swyddogion a cynghorwyr eraill I fyny. Dyna rhan o system democrataidd. Ond dwi'n meddwl bod yn bwysig I chi fod yn ymwybodol o faint o oriau, dyddiau, wythnosau o waith di-dal rwy fi fel un, ond degau o bobl tu ôl I fi wedi gorfod rhoi mewn i'r broses yma I gyrraedd fan hyn, yn gwbl yn ddi-dal am bod na ddim addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg, addas na dilyniant I addysg cynradd Cymraeg pitw I gael yn yr ardal yma, gyda canlyniadau echrydus i'r iaith yn y rhan yma o'r byd. Mae'r etholaeth dwi'n cynrychioli, mae nifer o siaradwyr Cymraeg wedi disgyn o dros 60% I 36% mewn 10 mlynedd rhwng 2001 a 2011. Gan I ofn gweld be fydd y canlyniadau y sensws flwyddyn hon. Just eisiau gwneud y pwynt yna. Mae yna pwynt arall, mae yna dipyn bach o sôn am llefydd gweigion yn yr ysgolion. Mae yna pwyslais wedi cael ei roi ar y llefydd gweigion mewn ysgolion cynradd. Dwi'n meddwl bod yna 18% o llefydd ysgolion cynradd yn wag. Does yna ddim pwyslais wedi cael ei roi ar y ffaith bod yn Sir Drefaldwyn, mae rhywbeth gosach I 25% o llefydd ysgol uwchradd yn wag. Mae yna gor-capacity yn yr sector uwchradd yn waeth nag ydy yn y sector cynradd. Mae gyda y cynllun fan hyn I sefydlu ysgol dwy ffrwd, a digwydd bod yn Llanfaircyreinion, a dyn ni'n gorfod dweud hwnna mwyn sticio at y pwynt y craffu yma. Mae sefydlu ysgol dwy ffrwd yn Llanfaircyreinion yn rhwystro datblygiad o unrhyw ysgol benodedig Cymraeg yn unrhyw le arall yn Maldwyn. Mae'n tynnu niferoedd oddi wrth sefydlu unrhyw ysgol benodedig Cymraeg yn unrhyw rhan arall o'r Sir Drefaldwyn, o Gogledd Powys os liciwch chi. A os ni'n licio gofyn felly, os oes yna gan bod yr WESP 2017 I 2020 dal mewn grym ac wedi cael ei cymeradwyo dim ond 19 mis yn ôl gan y Cabinet ac wedi cael ei cymeradwyo gan Llywodraeth Cymru. Ydych chi wedi cael caniatâd gan Llywodraeth Cymru I anwybyddu'r agwedd hwn o'r cynllun datblygu addysg Cymraeg, sef y nod I sefydlu ysgol benodedig Cymraeg yn Unai Drenewydd neu Trallwng. Ond lle bynnag mae ysgol benodedig Cymraeg, mae datblygiad hwnnw mynd i cael ei tanseilio gan sefydliad ysgol dwy ffrwd Gymraeg uwchradd yn Llanfair gan mod dyna'r lleoliad dan sylw. Diolch.
Iawn, mae canllawiau'r West newydd, dwi'n meddwl newydd gyrraedd y tîm bore yma. Byddwn ni yn mynd ati nawr i ysgrifennu West newydd ar gyfer y 10 mlynedd nesaf, a rhan o hwnnw bydd yn amlwg i edrych ar lle mae'r West 2017-2020 wedi cyrraedd hefyd, felly bydd rhaid ni...
Sori Marian, bosib sôn am y West gyffredol, presennol, achos dydy'r West newydd ddim wedi cael ei gymeradwyo eto, a dyn ni'n mynd i gweithredu ar y West olaf yn yr achos hwn.
Mi fydd rhaid ni adrodd i'r Llywodraeth ar lle dyn ni wedi cyrraedd efo'r West cyfredol, a mi fyddwn ni'n wedyn yn derbyn ymateb gan y Llywodraeth. Ond fel rhan o symud ymlaen gyda'r West newydd, mi fyddwn ni'n gorfod edrych ar beth sydd wedi mynd yn dda, beth sydd ddim wedi mynd yn dda, lle dyn ni gallu mynd ymhellach gyda'r West newydd. Felly, dyn ni ddim wedi cael caniatad, ond dyn ni'n disgwyl caniatad, does ddim angen caniatad. Mi fydd angen ymateb i'r West cyfredol pan fyddwn ni'n dechrau llunio'r West newydd.
Ond i ddylse fo bod yn elfen eitha pwysig i ymgynghori efo'r Llywodraeth i weld os dyn nhw'n fodlon efo'r penderfyniad yma. Mae yna ddigon yn ein plith, ni'n deall... Yn cysefydlu'r... Dych chi sôn am... Mae yna gefnogaeth i datblygu addysg Cymraeg ar gyfer plant ysgol Llanfair. Dio ddim yn dweud mae'r holl ymchwil yna wedi awgrymu, mae'r rhywle arall dyle'r ysgol benededig Cymraeg bod i darparu'r addysg hwnnw. A mae hwnna wedi cael ei anwybyddu yn y cynnig yma.
Dwi'n credu bod ni'n deud yn eitha clir yn y ddogfen ymgynghori lle mae'r newid yna wedi digwydd. Felly, mi fyddwn ni yn symud ymlaen nawr gan gydnabod yr sylwadau sydd wedi dod i'r ymgynghoriad yma. Mi fyddwn ni'n symud ymlaen nawr i drafod gyda ysgolion Ceredigion er mwyn symud ymlaen ar yr agenda cyfrwng Gymraeg yng Nghyreinion. Felly mae hwnnw ar hyn o bryd, a dyn ni'n mynd nôl i cabinet wythnos nesaf, hwnnw bydd yn gyrru'r peth ymlaen o hyn ymlaen.
Ond dyna'r addewidion i drafod, oedden ni'n... Pam cynnwys hwnna yn y ddogfen hyn fel tasau fo'n gyfraniad i datblygu addysg Gymraeg yn yr ardal yma. Dydy addo i drafod ddim yn ddatblygiad. Dyn ni wedi bod yn trafod ers degawdau a dyn ni'n apethydd.
Bryn, I'm going to come in now and if the translator could let me know when she's finished translating what you've said, and then I'll come in. Sorry. Okay. I think, Bryn, we've had the reassurance that this is not the final destination for this particular school, and that as we look broader, more broadly at provision, we're going to have another opportunity to look at this. And I know specifically we've got papers on Welsh language education and post-16 that will be coming to us in more detail. And I think we have an opportunity then to get into a bit more detail on this. I understand your concerns in relation to the existing WESP and the potentially contradictory nature. But at this stage, we have an opportunity here and a commitment from the service and the school to enhance the provision of Welsh language at this site, which in and of itself may strengthen the business case for developing a Welsh language high school in the area. I understand the concerns you have, but I don't think we can explore them much further today within the bounds of what we are discussing. I'm going to bring Councillor Gwynfor and then Councillor David, who both got hands up.
Good afternoon. Yeah, Chair, I was going to say something similar, really. It's a very interesting debate and a debate which needs to be had, but the decision to create the new age school at Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion, that is what we're discussing today, and it fits wholly with the policy agreed by the Cabinet and Council and what we've actually scrutinised in the past. It is difficult. We're turning this into Welsh language provision, and I totally understand Bryn, and he knows I'm very supportive of the establishment of the Welsh language and getting that going in. But there will be a separate consultation, and any decision on that matter would be subject to any consideration or consultation. My reading of the agreed policy is that all age schools would be created around each of the 13 secondary schools. That's already been said. A network comprises of primary and secondary schools, and not just secondary one. The decision about all age schools needs to tie back to Donaldson and changes in education provision and experience. Emphasis should be on quality aspirations of school with wraparound provision and building, sporting, cultural, linguistic excellences. Financial benefits, in my view, will occur if the rationalised primary schools around each of all the through schools further down the line. I think the important point for us to consider today, and having been involved, well, chair of the Ysgol Llanfyllin project also in the north of the county, the governing bodies there were very, very ambitious, and we really had to sell ourselves to officers of the authority, and it was with working together that we managed to create an all-through school, and the ambition and the project which those governors had. I think what we're missing here, I would guess that there's great ambitious plans from both governing bodies again, and the community have supported that. So they would create their wider aspirations about wraparound provision, breadth of learning, sporting, working with businesses, etc. So I think that's what we should consider, and we mustn't forget that was the direction which the schools wished to go. And it's interesting that once again the authority has supported that because it fits in within their policy. So I think that's important to remember.
Thank you, Gwynfor. Do any officers want to come back on that? If not, I'll bring David in.
Just to say,
Emma.
Councillor Peter, absolutely, Councillor Gwynfor, it's spot on. You know, we're on that journey. It's all aligned with the strategy. The request was come from the community, and we want to be supportive of that way forward. This isn't the final destination. There's still more work to do, and I agree. I think there are two different components being mixed here. Whereas the actual proposal is around the all-age school and to accelerate the dialogue, as you referred to, Chair, around enhancing the language offer. So, yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Gwynfor.
Councillor David.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just been reading in the chat what Councillor Sandra has to say, and I think that's some quite relevant points there. But I've got two questions, and the one is sort of closely related to the other, really. In setting up an all-age school in Llanfair, but it will not just be all-age, it will be bilingual as well. Is the portfolio holder and officers, are they confident that this school, or effectively schools, will be viable within the funding package? And second, what steps to make sure that funding which should currently go to the primary school will remain with the primary school in both languages? And what is in place to make sure that funding that will be going into the sort of year 7, 8, 9 in the high school will remain with those one funding stream running right across the schools? I'll wait there, Chairman.
Thank you, David. Geraint, I think you want to come in.
I'll come in quickly before I'll need to leave, I'm afraid, in a moment. What I would say is what changes with this is you have one governing body that oversees the education of a child from the age of 4 until they leave the school. And the responsibility then is the senior leadership. Likewise, you have a head teacher who oversees the learning of a child from the age of 4 to when they leave school as well. And therefore the budget, they work on a combined budget, and the whole governing body is accountable for ensuring that every child is able to have what they need at every point in their education journey. The messages that we have from where these already established elsewhere, and of course we've already got 2 in our own local authority in Llanfellyn and over in Bro Hyddgen, they are mindful that the budget is allocated equitably right across the board. It's not a concern that we're picking up in these 2 schools or elsewhere in Wales, because there isn't a competition between anybody. The responsibility rests with the same people right across the age range, and I'd be very hopeful that that's the feedback you'll have if you ask up in Llanfellyn or in Bro Hyddgen, and that's what we'd reasonably expect here as well. As we move forward, clearly there's been a commitment to review the funding formula. There was a review last year around secondary. There's ALN this year. We would have done a bigger one, except the circumstances of COVID would have made that particularly challenging. But we intend to get on with that, and we will need then to have, as an outcome of that, a long-term model for the funding of all age schools. There's currently, the finance department have been using a model up to now, and we'll take a good look at the equity throughout that, but there are no concerns being reported back on it.
Okay, David, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, Chairman, I did have a second part to the question. Well, I can't remember whether it was the first or the second part now. What are the arguments that the new setup will be viable? That effectively a junior school in 2 languages and a high school in 2 languages with this number of pupils will be viable?
Could I just come back on that? Is the question around the financial viability of it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, financial and educational, obviously, fine. But for the moment, I'm looking at the financial.
Okay. The proposal has a school that is certainly no less viable than the current configuration of running 2 separate schools. So that's the first thing. So there isn't a negative step here. In terms of longer term viability, that's the challenge we're seeking to address by having 13 all age schools, which means that as we bring forward proposals around investment, and as the change rolls out, viability needs to be one of the underlying and key principles for every school, because if you're not viable, ultimately your education offer becomes depleted. So there'll be no detriment in terms of viability short term here, and then we need to move on to look at how it becomes viable. And I think a key part of the challenge for Llanfair is to do with how it evolves from here. That involves how it works with its other primary partners and what its own offer is, because we want it to be a stable, long-term partner in the Powys school family. You know, that's the reality of the strategy that's been approved. I'm afraid I'm being called into a WLGA meeting. I'm going to have to duck out, I'm afraid. I apologise, Chair, as I go.
Thank you, Geraint.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. I'll be back if I finish early with them.
David?
Well, I mean, I noticed that there's a thing gone up in the chat now from Bryn. You know, how will a school with 213 English medium students in Llanfair be able to compete with twice as many GCSE options in Welshpool High School? You know, that is the question that's going to be there. And I suspect that sooner or later, if the Welsh language school appears in the Severn Valley, the same thing will occur with the Welsh language part of it. So I'd be glad if someone could reassure me on this point, Chairman.
Okay, I'll come in
You
here.
don't all have to rush at once.
Just to say, we have to look at the future numbers, don't we? And if our aspiration, as stated in the documents, is that we move Cerenion along the Welsh language continuum, we do have to satisfy the needs of our future primary pupils and maybe even children that aren't even born yet, in terms of making this school as good as it can be. So it is going to be a fairly small school compared to the other schools in Powys, but well, relatively in Powys, but the sustainability is there, plus the educational viability is there, as Geraint said as well. But it does mean that we really have to consider how this school moves along that language continuum.
I don't want to go back to the language conversation per se, but I am looking at a very, very small school here with 400 pupils in it, never mind them split over 2 separate streams. And it does concern me about the long-term offer with it in that location as a dual medium school. If you're telling me that there is strong consideration of it becoming a single medium school, I might have more confidence in its sustainability. But at the moment, it concerns me that we're not going to have the breadth of choice for pupils going there that schools that are nearby will have. And you may see, you have to face the risk that pupils, particularly on the eastern side of the catchment, may find Welsh Pool more attractive if their parents look at the post-14 offer when they're looking to move them into school, particularly if they're at a different school that are not part of the all-through process. It is concerning, and something that I think as a scrutiny committee we would be remiss if we didn't highlight and get some significant reassurance on.
Based on the intelligence that we've got at the moment, looking at the children that currently attend Llanfair Cerenion and also looking at the feeder schools, Llanfair is actually drawing in children from Welsh Pool, Newtown, down as far as Llanidloes area, some from Llanbachlin. So it's not just the immediate area. Marianne is right in terms of picking up the points there around, you know, the future destination, I suppose, of the school longer term. But that's subject to, that would be subject to statutory consultation, obviously, around a proposal. And also there's still the work to do around the wider catchment area and the primary schools in Llanfair Cerenion area. So when we did the original analysis of looking at the numbers of schools across the county, then technically you were looking at less secondary schools and considerably less primary schools. But then you've got to take into account the geography of Powys, and you've got to take into account what's acceptable in respect of access to education for children across the county. And when we pulled together the foundations, I suppose, really for the strategy, there were all those variables that we took into account. And hence we're, I mean, it's far more complex than this, but hence how we arrived at needing to have provision in all 13 localities across Powys. So this is everything that we're watching. We're updating the information as well, Councillor David. So originally we did our analysis on the 2019 PLAS data, and we also looked at previous years as to what was happening with the projections and where were families and children deciding to send their children for education. We've recently obtained the PLAS data and done the analysis on the 2020 information that will soon be available, so we can keep a watching eye. Unfortunately, there's a delay on the 2021 data at a national level, but these are all the things that we've got to keep a watching brief on. And also there's the element of we understand that there's going to be a significant number of individuals moving out of city areas and move into more rural locations, but how many of those will end up in Powys and where in Powys, we just don't know. So we've got to continue to monitor this. But based on the analysis that we've done so far, and taking into account a number of different variables and different factors, we believe that the proposal that we've put forward is right, based on the information that we've got to hand so far.
Okay,
Thank you, Chairman.
Margaret.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, good, thanks.
I don't. You can hear me. Yeah. I don't think my chat was working properly. To start with, I was concerned about the numbers in the high school and the projected of the looking to the future. And even though we've talked about the transformation programme, and there will obviously have to be a larger transformation in all areas, which will include smaller primary schools. But I don't think in Llanfair, with the current information or information I have, that it would make a great deal of difference to high school numbers, because it would possibly increase, well, it would increase possibly numbers in the primary school because there are spaces. But in the high school, those children in the catchment area, in the cluster area, the cluster schools, in the main, I think, already go to Llanfair, or are they going elsewhere? Because I don't think it will make a difference to the high school numbers unless children are coming from somewhere else into the high school. And when we look, we've got, a 5% in the document decrease in pupil numbers by 2025. So as you say, Pete, the capacity is 603 in the high school, and would have 438 at that in 2025 based on that. And so it was actually creating a new school with so many surplus places, but also linked to the wider transformation process because of the post-16, which we've already had reference to, and the wider offer that we really will need to be giving to post-16. And will that impact again on numbers in the school when that particular situation is decided and that transformation is decided? Would that pull, it may influence numbers again in the school in a negative way.
So in respect to the post-16, there will be papers coming before yourselves and Cabinet. So before yourselves, April time, I think from memory, based on the programme plan, and Cabinet, it's around May. Don't hold me to the exact time. It is May, yeah.
May, yeah.
We've got a lot going on, yeah. Around May time. And obviously as officers, we've seen that in the initial work and the findings of that. So I won't touch on the post-16 right now, but what we're doing when we're looking at the overall programme and the overall infrastructure of education as Powys is obviously joining all those dots and keeping a watching brief on, so what are we proposing around post-16? How can we move from the status quo to an offer, regardless of age and regardless of language preference. And I think the main thing is that we're picking up on, you know, we do need to move forward with the language offer. We do need to make sure that services are as local as possible. We can't go to the extreme of what you would do if you just did your analysis on paper and based on numbers, because as I've said, Powys is a quarter of the size of Wales, and I think that the element here is around the delivery of that strategy. The analysis that was developed was around having those 13 all-age schools, one per locality. Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerychwr is one of those localities, and what you won't have is you won't have the same size of school in each of the areas of Powys, because one size doesn't fit all. But what we need to do is make sure that we can provide the best education within the infrastructure that is available. We need to put the money into creating that education, I think, and that's what we all signed up to in terms of the learner entitlement. And what will happen is it's going to be a matter of time. You know, we're at the start of this programme, really, based on the strategy. In 10 years' time, it'll look very different. And unfortunately, we can't just move from where we are now to where everyone sees the end goal, so to speak, because we've got to transition through it. Now, what happens by moving to an all-age school is it enables that transition arrangement to be more seamless. And I'm picking up on some comments that are in the chat box. At the moment, we have people choosing, for whatever reason, to and this isn't just in respect of this proposal, this is a broader statement, that people are choosing to drive past their nearest school and to go to alternative provision. Well, actually, what we need to do is make sure we're providing the best education that we can in all of the schools that we've got, so that people don't choose to drive past their nearest school and can access that local provision, because the local provision they're going to get is equally as good as the school that's 10, 20 miles down the road that they're otherwise choosing. I think the difficulty here, this is an extremely complex programme of change. There is fantastic work taking place out there in the schools. Change is difficult, but we've got to nudge our way forward in terms of that delivery to provide that better offer, because what's the alternative?
Can I just ask, from the point of view of this particular school, and do you have the numbers for those that actually do drive somewhere else, who could go to the primary school in that the primary school's catchment, and likewise in the high school, how many go elsewhere who actually are in the cluster of schools that would normally feed the high school?
I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but absolutely, we know where every child lives and which school each child's going to, and then we can see where they're, what's happening across the county, basically, and in particular, we've got the specific detail on this school as well, but I just don't have it to hand right now. But yes, we do have it.
So, but you don't know if it's a significant number or a small number, purely because if it was a large number, a new school, this proposal may attract those people back. So are we talking about a lot of people that from the locality would be attracted back?
It's a small number from recollection, but we can confirm that.
Yeah.
Can I just also add in something else as well, just to add to Emma's point? This particular proposal sits under the strategic objective of improving learner entitlement and experience. So I think what it allows, I'm just looking at the pupil numbers myself, but then if you look at the staffing structure you need there, and how the staffing structure in all through school can be different to normal schools. You can have the transitional planning. You can plan for that child throughout its life in that school. So that's one of the benefits. And we have been to visit a number of all through schools and looking at the different staffing structure, to the way they phase the schools in different way. It's not primary and secondary, it's according to different phases. That transition gap is really looking at years 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and looking at that together. There's lots and lots of benefits of that holistic approach. And I think an all through school, if you think about it as being, have that word holistic in your mind when you look at the child and the journey of that child, that's about improving the learner entitlement. Coming back to the viability issue, I think one of the things we've always said about all through schools is there isn't a significant saving to the authority from an all through school, and we've been quite upfront about that in every all through school proposal that we've proposed, and it's all about improving learning outcomes, improving the learner entitlement. However, if you have a senior management team of looking at and managing an all through school, there are efficiencies that can be made within that school. And if you have the right leadership, the right governing body, the right ambition, and I think the word ambition was mentioned earlier, if you have that in that school, then that school can then fly. And I think that's what we're trying to get to with Cerenion. Sorry, a bit long-winded.
Can I ask, from Mahuntleth's point of the area in Mahuntleth, how long has it been the all through school? I'm trying to remember.
Since 2014.
So we are getting evidence, therefore. So have we got evidence from that of the different structures and the opportunities it provides? Because it would have been good to see some of that somewhere to back up what was in the documents regarding the benefits of all through schools.
Yes, we would have evidence from Brohydgen. We'd also have evidence, emerging evidence from Llanfyllin as well about how they're structuring. The other issue as well, obviously, Brohydgen is on 2 separate sites, completely separate, and that causes challenges. So the sites that are closely integrated, it's a much easier approach to an all through school. Okay.
Thanks for that, Margaret. And you've actually reminded me of something that we haven't been doing because of COVID, which is having committee member briefings to bring us up to date on progress in different issues and the latest experience. And it may well be that once things quieten down on the COVID front a little bit and there's some stability in the teaching side, so we haven't got officers constantly adjusting to a changing environment, that it might well be that we want to have a session where in private we're brought up to speed on some of the latest thinking and some of the experience that we've got internally with some of the progress and some of the changes that have been made to our schools and some of the evidence on which these decisions are being taken. Because I'm aware that we probably haven't had an actual development session specifically for the committee for about 12 months now, and that's been brought home quite seriously at times during this conversation and this discussion. Bryn, you've been listening quite quietly. I haven't got any other indications of contributions. Unless this stirs other discussion up, I suggest we'll hear from you, and then we'll draw things to a close, and when we'll explain the procedures that we need to go through. And you're mute, Bryn.
Better for all of us, perhaps.
I wasn't going to say that.
Okay, I mean, mae'n anodd ofnadwy cael atebion resymegol, dwi'n teimlo. Mae'r cynllun yma yn creu un ysgol, ond go iawn, 2 ysgol, mae un ysgol fach, ond 2 ysgol fach ofnadwy mewn un adeilad ydy'r cynnig fan hyn. Dydy o ddim yn symud mlaen diolch yn helpu efo'r addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg, dydy o ddim yn helpu efo'r addysg cyfrwng Saesneg. Pam mynd trwy'r drafferth o dod fyny efo'r cynllun yma, pam bod yna cynllun yn sefyll ar y silff yn barod i greu ysgol uwchradd penodedig Cymraeg. Oes na ryw benderfyniad yn erbyn creu ysgol benodedig gyfrwng Cymraeg uwchradd yn Maldwyn, a dyna'r nod, ac os nad oes, aswch chi esbonio lle, neu mae'n dweud lle, ond sut ydych chi'n actually mynd i cyflawni y wesp bresennol a sefydlu ysgol benodedig cyfrwng Cymraeg yn Maldwyn. Dwi'n meddwl bod hwnna di'r peth yn y pen draw, achos mae tynnu, mae'r ymgynghori, mae'n enghraifft glasurol o difaid yn rŵl fan hyn. Ar hyn o bryd, mae'r ymgynghoriad gyd wedi digwydd rhwng yr ysgol gynradd a'r ysgol uwchradd. A dyn ni'n gweld bod y ffigurau y plant yn dangos bod yr ysgol, y disgyblion Cymraeg o Drenewydd a Trallwng, os liciwch chi, yn cynnal y dosbarthiadau yn Llanfair. Hebddyn nhw, fysa y ffrwd Gymraeg ddim yn gweithio, ac heb y ffrwd Gymraeg, fysa ffrwd Saesneg ddim yn gweithio chwaith. Does na ddim synwyr addysgiadol na cyllidol yn deillio o'r cynllun yma. A dwi'n siŵr bod chi'n gwybod yn iawn bod yna options eraill, a fysa fo'n ddoethach i drafod rheini cyn mynd lawr a rhoi'r rhybudd statudol ar y penderfyniad yma. Oes modd camu yn ôl a cael y drafodaeth call dyn ni angen. Diolch.
Sorry, I'm asking, is Councillor Phil coming in here? Oh, he's still going. Sorry.
I'm happy to. I mean, again, I don't really think that this is in the nature of the call-in or the nature of the discussion, because we are talking about Welsh language in the Severn Valley here. When we discuss about pupil numbers, and we look at the commitments that we've made to Ysgol Bro Hyfgyn and the way that is moving along the language continuum, and how we want to push that along, and we want to do the same thing in other areas. I've constantly said I don't think this is a resolution to the Welsh language education offer in the Severn Valley, and I would welcome a discussion over the future of Welsh language in the Severn Valley, but there are elements of the WESP that Powys is committed to and should be committed to in terms of solving this conundrum going forward. But again, this isn't a light switch moment, is it? You don't just flick a switch and all of a sudden a brand new school just opens overnight. And Bryn, we've got to be very, very careful here. We need to take communities and people with us on this journey. We're not forcing this on people. And I think that the work that has been done with Llanfair is progressive, and I think that there are commitments within the paper to accelerate discussions to move Llanfair along the Welsh language continuum in terms of this specific proposal. But also, from the outset, status quo is not an option in any of our settings. It isn't an option in any of our schools. It's been brought up in the chat is why are we moving people out of their catchment area? Because if we're going to offer an equitable offer across all schools, well, that's not possible, is it? We can't offer, because of the pupil numbers, equity in every school. We should be able to offer every learner equity, no matter where they live, and that should be some way. What Llanfair becomes as a result of the transformation proposal is yet to be decided and yet to be discussed. But I do welcome the progressive discussion that we've been having with the governing bodies in Llanfair on this proposal, and I think the elements of today's discussion prove that there needs to be wider discussion over the future of the language in the Severn Valley. Is it too late? Yes, Bryn, it should have happened a long time ago. I completely agree. And I don't think any of us are going to disagree on that. We do need a resolution to it, and it can't happen quick enough. But I think that this move by the school, in terms of them wanting to move to an all through all age school, is a positive one. You know, there is a number of proposals that we're bringing to you regarding governance. Governance is key. You know, we have currently, you know, far too many governing bodies in terms of each school. They need to be working much closer together, as we do in catchment areas. You know, that's worked incredibly well during COVID, and we need to move that forward. Looking at how other schools are federated, governing bodies that have worked closely with the authority. I don't think any of us are disagreeing. It can happen quick enough, and it's unfortunate that we are where we are, but we're not going to solve this in one meeting or one decision. That's, thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. Did either of the officers want to come back on that, on any of the questions there on a factual rather than political basis? Emma? No. In which case, I don't think we have any other questions in relation to the discussions that we've had here today. I think if I can summarise, and I'll give Emma and Phil a chance to add to the summary as we draw this to a close. I think we've explored in some detail the implications of this decision on provision of Welsh language within the immediate area, and it's quite clear that there is an overlap in terms of the catchment of this school and the wider Severn Valley. And I think when we have the Welsh language proposals coming back to us, as has been mentioned later in the year, we are most definitely going to be looking at the implications of provision at this school in relation to the whole area, because I think what's been established today is that the future viability of this school is intrinsically linked with the future provision of Welsh language across northern Montgomeryshire, if you establish, simply because the school population is split 50-50. But that's a question for another day. And it's a question for another day because we've had the reassurance that this is not the end of the path for this school in relation to the wider powers transformation journey. We've touched a fair bit on the educational viability of the school with such small numbers, and I think I would detect from members that there is still some concern about that. The numbers are very small and the provision is therefore going to be constrained, and that is something that I'm not convinced one way or the other whether we've had full reassurance on that, but I think we have had recognition that it is an issue. I think touching on the wider issues, we are seeing quite significant breadth of consultation and awareness that there is a need to move things forward, because sometimes a small change can open up changes elsewhere within the process, and that's reassurance I think all of us would be needing. But I think there is still quite a lot of disquiet amongst some members of the committee. I don't know whether that's a majority or otherwise around this proposal. So I think that drawing out from quite a difficult session in terms of moving things forward, I think that's where we are. As I said, I'll give Phil and Emma or Marianne, I'm not sure who wants to come in, a chance to summarise things as they've seen the day, because chairing and summarising is not one of my greatest skills, and it's been a very tricky session with some technical issues as well to move forward. Phil, do you want to first, or Emma? I don't mind which.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I think you've done quite a good job of it. To be fair, it has been a difficult session based on the fact that it should have been done previous to this, isn't it? Which is understandable and is frustrating for everybody. So, I do thank everybody for that aspect of it. You know, I think there needs to be, you know, clarity in terms of what some of the proposals would be. Otherwise, you know, like, you know, is it a case of what the proposal should be is that we should be closing Llanfairpwllgwyngyllgogerynion and opening a Welsh language school in the Severn Valley? Is that what a proposal could be from Scrutiny? I'm asking, you know, for that to be quite open there, isn't it? Is that what we should be doing? And then obviously also, you know, when we've got the capital constraints that we do have, and we all know that, you know, when we look at the priorities that have come through in terms of what we're building to in the transformation to date, in terms of looking at small schools and how they're unsustainable, and how we're tackling that with the number of papers that are coming towards you. Also, the fact that there's elements of certain decisions of recent years, such as the Calon Cymru decision, that was probably not in everybody's best interest and is still proving to be a difficult situation that, you know, needs resolution ASAP. You know, and also some of the other consultations that we're bringing forward that are around the Welsh language in Montgomeryshire, in terms of Ysgol Dyffryn Trannan and Bro Hyddgen, and then obviously also, you know, looking at how we're wanting to move, so we have got no more junior and infant schools, and also incorporating a sustainable model there forward in other proposals, such as the Mount Street Infants and Juniors and Craddock School. You know, we have only got an element of capital that we can work with. We are working within that to make a transformation journey that works. You know, this isn't about school closures. This is about learner entitlement and about utilising our estate to the best of its ability. And I think that's what we're potentially doing here. So, you know, I would welcome, you know, clear direction potentially from Scrutiny as to what they believe should be a proposal here, rather than maybe suggestions. You know, I think that there's obviously a discourse here in terms of the direction that, in terms of some people, so a collective view of where Scrutiny should see this, then that would be quite interesting. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair, for your role today.
Thanks, Phil, for that challenge. I think the problem that all of us are identifying here today, and why there is the discomfort, is that we've ended up touching on the piece of the framework in quite some detail that we haven't got the documents in front of us yet, and that's the detailed Welsh language paper that's due to come before us in a couple of months' time. And I think that is where the problem in some ways lies. And I don't know, I'm trying to think on my feet here as to how we can reconcile that.
I think I've got to come back on that, and I think that's exactly what this consultation has done. However, this decision has moved the school into a more up-to-date governance model, you know, in line with the all-age principle that we are looking to do across the county, that it is moving on that journey. So I think, you know, again, progress, relationships, everything that's been built there, you know, the community are engaged more with what we are intending to do as a county. So there are positives from this decision, and I do appreciate the frustrations that are coming out. So again, I agree, mate, it's something we can take outside of the meeting about how we move this forward, and again, aligning Scrutiny to the Cabinet Work Programme, which going forward we will ensure happens.
Thanks for that, Phil. Do Marianne or Emma wish to have any final comments?
Well, I think I'll just pick up on that final point. All of our papers are absolutely included in the work programme. So once Scrutiny determine which papers they want to scrutinise, obviously we'll come before you and have the sessions. I think from my perspective, it's impossible to please everybody. There are a number of things that we have to consider. And the main thing for me is about doing the right thing by the learner, making sure that services are accessible and value for money. And obviously then my education colleagues, they'll be doing their utmost to make sure that the education is the best it can be. Moving this forward is taking us forward a step in respect of our transformation journey. It's great to work with a community that want to move things forward. And actually, this is just the start, not the end. And I think for any area that wants to strengthen the Welsh medium provision, it's something Estyn clearly picked up on around Welsh medium, and we need to do more of it. So we look forward to bringing further proposals before you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emma. In which case, can I turn to Wyn? Thank you all to officers, portfolio holder, for your contributions today. I was going to turn to Wyn, but I think our County Solicitor Clive, you wish to come in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I just remind you of what I indicated to you at the start of the meeting, is that the Constitution and 736(7) requires the Scrutiny Committee, if they're concerned about the decision, then they may refer it back to the decision-making body, namely the Cabinet, for reconsideration. So that's the decision which the Scrutiny Committee is going to come to eventually, is that whether there are concerns that with the decision which you as a committee acting together believe should be reconsidered by the Cabinet. So can I just leave you with that?
Thank you, Clive. I think that was what Wyn was going to come on to talk about the procedures now, because
it is, Chair.
I have yet to go through a formal call-in, so I'm looking to you for some very strong guidance.
We don't do many, Chair. Pre-scrutiny is usually the better route, but we're learning our way through this one, in fairness. And firstly, I think I've got to say it's not up to Scrutiny to make brand new proposals back to the Cabinet. The role of Scrutiny today is actually to raise concerns about this particular paper and this particular paper only, and the decision that's been taken. So the question, and it's going to be a straight yes or no answer. I've got a poll already set up for this, as to, have you heard sufficient assurances from the officers in terms of this decision, the understanding that this is actually a step change in a journey rather than the end of the journey? If that's your understanding, then you may be looking at saying, yes, we are assured at this point in time with this particular decision that it can then go ahead. If you're not happy and haven't had enough assurances that actually this decision is and your understanding of where this decision is in terms of the wider context, and you don't look at the wider context, you're only looking at the decision, but you need to understand that in terms of the wider context, that you have concerns. We will then record what those concerns are and report it back to the Cabinet, and they will need to go back and review the decision. They can still take the same decision again and continue. We have no further right to call in. So it's a one-off opportunity, or, as you say, if you're happy with it to a point, or with assurances, you let it carry on its journey. The other thing you could do, if there are wider things about which are outside of this actual decision, in terms of process, etc., that you just may want to alert the Cabinet to, we could do that as a sort of aid memo to the Cabinet outside of the formal calling process. But that is a very, very separate process. So the answer for you is yes or no. Have you had enough assurances about the decision and where it is in the overall scheme of things moving forward? And I've got a poll ready, which is a yes or no answer, Chair.
Thank you for that, Wyn. Is that a decision for us collectively
Yes.
to have a discussion about, or is it a decision we take individually and then revisit afterwards in terms of what the reasons are?
It's a
basically,
decision collectively, Chair.
should we be talking now and discussing before we take a vote?
Yes, Chair, you should actually consider that first. If is a collective decision, it'll be a straight vote, yes or no. That will then be the decision of the committee.
Thanks for that guidance. As I say, I'm learning on my feet on this one. Does anyone have any comments at this point? I'll start with Bryn and then others can follow.
Iawn. Ydyn ni'n gallu cael drafodaeth o'r penderfyniad, drafodaeth private i'r grŵp craffu o
Hang on a second, Bryn. Ulwys, are you still there? Because I'm not getting a translation.
Okay. Basically, can we have a private discussion as a scrutiny group?
Bryn, do start again.
Ydyn ni'n gallu trafod hwn fel grŵp craffu yn breifat os liciwch chi, ddim yn bresenoldeb ymwelwyr a swyddogion neu beidio.
I look to Wyn and Clive for guidance, but I think we are in a public meeting, and
exactly, Chair. You're in a public meeting.
We are public, full stop.
Well, dim problem. Gawn ni drafodaeth ysgwch yna?
Okay, thank you for that. Does anyone want to make any immediate comments? I'd rather the initial discussion come from the floor rather than me leading. Thank you, David. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. In order to start the discussion, I feel that this is the Cabinet have expended a lot of energy on what they've said by their own admission today is a stopgap measure. And to me, I think we need to give the schools a bit more certainty than that. Now, if the Cabinet can come back and sort of tweak that decision in some way, that might make it clearer to the school. But I think both the portfolio holder and some of the officers emphasised that this is just, as I say, a stopgap on a journey. And I think that we should be asking the Cabinet to provide more certainty to the school as to the future. And for that reason, I'm minded at the moment to vote to return it to the Cabinet.
Thank you, David. Councillor Sandra, then Councillor Lucy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've tried to listen as carefully as I can to all that has been said, but from reading the documentation, it does weigh heavily regarding the Welsh language, and I take on board that this is not talking about the Welsh language, but the feedback does relate to that, and I mean, I've living in the Estragon-Nice area, when we were talking about school modernisation, we talked about everything. And I would have thought the transformation would have been a similar track, different words, possibly, but you know, we have done it here. And yes, I hope lessons have been learned in how we went through the process, which should be done. But I would have thought that this process would have been the transformation of the whole area, not just 2 schools. And I can't see for the life of me. I mean, officers have said to us throughout the document, oh, value for money. It's not value for money. We are utilising money for officers' time to do the consultation, and the consultation is only on a fraction of what the bigger picture should be in the area. And I can't see why, with the pressures of COVID and everything else, why we don't sort of sit down and say to the members of the areas, this is an opportunity for us to transform the whole area. What do we need to do to go into that? How do we progress? Sorry, my phone's going. So I think it's a golden opportunity missed, as I've stated there. We will have issues. We will have issues relating to this coming around again. So there'll be more officer time out, whereas that officer time could actually then be focused on the next area. I'm sorry, I don't want to be seeming negative, but having gone through school modernisation, I know the time that has taken, and I know the results of it. And if a job's worth doing, it needs to be done properly. And I can't see how this is anything to do with transformation other than amalgamating two schools for a very short period of time, and then it'll have to be looked at again. So I'm not happy with this at all. I feel really frustrated. I know things slip through the net, pressures, etc. Had we had this in scrutiny before, we'd be having a different discussion, possibly. But having read the documents, I'm not happy at all with the process, and I would be saying no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandra. Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I accept absolutely everything that was said about this being a move as part of a longer continuum. But like Sandra, I do have concerns. I just don't see that there's enough benefit in the sort of short-term change to justify making that change, because even things like accepting having been through the change in Llanfostyn, things like new school uniforms, and okay, they don't have to have new school uniforms, but if they, you know, if they start to make those kind of changes, and then in another year or 2 years' time we're looking at more changes again, it's very unsatisfactory, and it's I don't see it as being beneficial for the school not having a clear future in mind. So I must admit, I'm still concerned.
Can I just make something clear?
Margaret?
Sorry.
Pete, I agree with everything everybody said before, but actually, I also feel that it has to be delayed, that we cannot have it changed in a short time, because what about the staff? What about the children? You know, this now is out there that this is only possibly an interim measure, which that sort of approach is not helping with staffing and stability in a school at all. So I really I do agree with everyone, and I don't feel happy with it. But the fact that now that the idea is out there that this is an interim measure must be very unsettling for staff and parents at the moment.
I'm hearing the tone coming across, and I'm aware that we will not be changing the decision. We will be raising specific concerns and asking Cabinet to look again at this. So I'm listening intently at the moment. I would welcome other interventions from members of the committee that we've not heard from yet, because I think it's something we need to consider things in the round. And if we are taking the step of referring this back to Cabinet, we need to have very solid grounds on which to do so, and very serious and testing questions that we need to ask them for. If we are not confident that the issues that we are going to be raising for them warrant that, we should take the view that this should go ahead. So it's just something I'm asking you to all think about. Graham, I will bring you in a second. Bryn first.
Iawn, diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n hapus I bobl eraill siarad cynta. Dwi wedi siarad lot yn barod, ond diolch. Mae yna cryn dipyn o aniddigrwydd ynglyn â'r penderfyniad yma yn ffinio ar ddicter mewn ysgolion sydd yn bwydo ysgol uwchradd, ac fel mae o'n benderfyniad tymor byr iawn. Does na ddim manteision addysgiadol. Mae dal yn mynd I fod yn ddwy ysgol fach mewn adeilad mawr, ac mae jyst eisiau edrych llawer iawn bellach lawr y lein de, lles y rai sy'n dymuno addysg cyfrwng Saesneg ac lles y blant sy'n dymuno addysg cyfrwng Cymraeg. mae o'n, dydy'r penderfyniad sgerbron ddim yn cyflawni yr hyn mae o'n honni bod yn mynd i gyflawni gwelliant darpariaeth ac yn y blaen ar y papur. So, fyswn ni'n gofyn iddo fynd nôl i'r cabinet iddyn nhw ail ystyried. Diolch.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yeah, by all means.
The whole point is that this discussion between the school and the authority has been going on for some time, nearly as long as the discussion between Llanfyllin and the authority. And I know we've moved on with Llanfyllin now, and it has been set up as an all-through school. So we know that this isn't the end game. Whatever the decision is, and whatever you refer back to us today, I don't accept that it's a stopgap. It is a step on a journey. And what I will say is that uncertainty is there no matter what you say today then. And if you turn it back to us, instead of bringing in even those minor savings of the £12,000, keeping a school in terms of the relationships that we've built and the conversations that we've got on track currently and working together with them to get to where we want to be, I think there are positive steps just from this decision. And I've got to take issue with what Wynne said before about I'm not asking Scrutiny to make recommendations to Cabinet. I'm asking Scrutiny for actual sound differences and proposals, not proposals as such, but to engage then with this. If we want to work together with this, put it in writing. What do you want to see? A paper for the future of Welsh education in Montgomeryshire or the Severn Valley. And to come back to what Councillor Sandra was saying, Estragunlais was involving one secondary school and a large number of primaries. This is involving it is involving every secondary school in Montgomeryshire in terms of the Welsh education in the Severn Valley. So therefore, it is a very different kettle of fish, and we simply do not have the resource or the ability to hit it in one. Why then did we not, when we were discussing the Llanfyllin all through school, ensure that we closed or dealt with all the small unsustainable schools in that proposal? I'm hearing numerous things here that weren't called for by members at the time as we were discussing them issues then. So I am committed to, for as long as I'm in this position, hitting them issues head on. But it's late now, isn't it? We should have been calling for it then, and I didn't hear them arguments then. I just had to make them comments. Sorry, Chair.
Thanks for that, Phil. And I am very much drawing on my experience of planning in this process, and that if we are going to be calling this in, I want to be sure that we are referring it back to you with some very solid reasons. And I want to tease those out from people before we actually take that vote, because what I don't want us to do is vote in favour of referring it back to you and then not having good grounds for you to have a discussion about afterwards. So thanks for those comments. Angela, sorry, I was going to bring. Have I brought Graham? Have I brought you in yet?
Not yet.
No. Go ahead, Graham, and then Angela. I called you and then Phil intervened. I apologise.
That's all right, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Just while I agree that we need to do something, it does concern me slightly that we have this transformation programme that we're looking to do across all the schools in Powys. This school, or these two schools, sorry, shouldn't prejudge it, are being merged at this point. Okay, I can see sort of the reasons why they're looking at this. But my concern is that what other things could other schools be doing, that are being put on hold because there's this wider transformation program? Why haven't we been focusing on that to try to address all of the points which have been raised by various different colleagues today, and a lot more besides? On the point that Councillor Phil made on savings, again, I come back to this. The figures that were given to this, committee in October, and looking at the figures that are in this paper, I make it that when we merge the two, we get a £47,000 deficit, which then gets either written off or moved to the council. That's going to take us 4 years to pay it off at the £12,000 per annum saving. that to me, again, does not seem like it's cost effective at this point to do that. So there are concerns there. And I think, you know, yes, something needs to be done, but I think something needs to be done far wider than just two schools. And that this is perhaps not the best decision at this point. That's my concerns. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Angela?
Thank you, Chair. I think Graham has said that more eloquently than I could, because unlike some of my fellow colleagues there, I'm not sure that I know which way to vote at this point. I think I can see both points of view. Like Graham, I can see that something needs to happen. I get Phil's passion that he wants to push things forward and move on with something. But again, I'm just not confident that this is that something. This one step on a ladder just doesn't seem ambitious enough to meet any of the goals that we're being told the council has in the wider context of education in Powys. At this point in time, I'm really unsure. So like yourself, I'd like some clarity on exactly what we would be bringing back and for what end goal. And I don't think we've got that yet. I think there's still too many questions unanswered here. Sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Bryn? You are mute, Bryn.
Sorry, Diolch. Just a very short comment. Councillor Phil asked for proposals, and I just think we just need to look at the wider picture and enact what's been recommended by Cabinet and Welsh Government 18 months ago. And act on it. Yeah.
Chair, can I make a suggestion very, very quickly? Apologies, just sort of to come up with this. I'm not disagreeing with what anybody said. I personal opinion, take out the cabinet portfolio bit. I can understand we need to do more in this area. If we take this back through cabinet now, that is going to be time and effort spent doing that, rather than potentially looking at what the resolution is for this going forward. It is a stepping. This discussion predates a lot of our involvement in terms of the future of transformation here. It is the winding up of a discussion over many years of where Llanber will be. That this is not the resolution for Llanber and the end game here in terms of the wider catchment area or anything. It's just we you know there'll be absolutely no point in just finishing this and starting again. We have got somewhere. There are milestones here that have been achieved, and I think we need to move on with them. I'm just there has been gains. We know from previous discussions that we've all had and debates over this that we need to do more, and this isn't enough. But this is the tail end of a discussion that's been going on for a long time. This isn't something that we have brought. This is the school wanting to move along this journey. And if we were to start again, it would involve a new consultation. We can't change this decision because nothing else was consulted on within this decision. This was the basis of the consultation. So that is the only decision we can make. It's either not do it or do it. I'm just getting frustrated here. We're just not getting very far.
I understand your frustration. I want to see us come out of this with something positive. I'm also realistic enough to recognise that we will probably pass this back to Cabinet if we decide to do that. Cabinet will consider what we are putting forward, but in all probability would not change their decision. And in that context, Phil, you're quite right. We're eating into officer time, and I unless I'm reading the meeting wrong, I'm hearing disquiet and a feeling that the decision might not be the best one, but it is a decision that is making a degree of progress. I am wondering whether the idea of accepting the decision but highlighting the concerns that we have about it in a letter to Cabinet that comes up with very clear guidance as to how Cabinet should approach similar step-by-step improvements in the future might be a more constructive way forward. Councillor Kath, I had actually
I've been
forgotten you were on. You have been like a church mouse today.
I have been extremely quiet, but you mustn't forget that I'm fairly new to this committee again. So some of the discussions that you've had previously, I've not been party to. So I'm finding myself a little bit lost at times. But I have to agree with you, Pete. I think we need to move on. We're trying to do transformation. This may not be quite ideal, but it's a step forward. And I think you are right that we need to move it forward now with recommendation to, I don't know whether agree with the Cabinet is the correct word, but we need to do something. We need to move forward. We've already heard that we've been doing this for the last 30 odd years. I mean, I've been a member now for over 20 years. And some of these discussions have been going round and round and round in circles, and nobody's prepared to put their hand up and make a decision. It's become very political and too political for my liking. I mean, Sandra has already told us about the Ystrad Gynllais thing. And for those of you, there's not very many around this table that will know what went on down in Ystrad Gynllais. I know you were there, Sandra, but all the other councillors are no longer there. There's none of the officers that I'm aware, well, they were perhaps in a much lesser capacity than they are today that were involved with the Ystrad Gynllais thing. It was horrendous. That took forever to get sorted out. And what we mustn't forget is Ystrad Gynllais is, yes, there were 10 or 12 schools, whatever they were, that were closed to open 4 primaries and enhance the secondary school. But it's a much smaller geographical area than we are talking about for the north, this part of Montgomeryshire. It's huge, and there's different cultural bits right the way through it. So it's going to take so much more time. I think this is probably a small step that we should carry on and do, and then look at the wider picture as we can get to dealing with more of the area concerned. And that's my view. I don't honestly know what else I can say, but as I say, I'm a bit on the back foot with some of it because I haven't been around it long enough and that as yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Kath. Councillor Martin.
I must admit, I do agree with Kath. It's not, but it is not meaty enough. It should have been a lot more of a, a bigger thing. I'm disappointed in just what's going on here.
It's a huge area.
I think we have to
move on.
We have to move on with things, and otherwise we'll be doing nothing. So yes, I agree. I think we should move on with it. To be honest,
yep.
I'm disappointed. I got to be honest. I'm very disappointed, but I think we need to move on. I have talked to some people up that area, and they think they want to embrace it. So there we go. That's my thoughts on it.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to you in a second, Bryn. For clarity, a question for you, either Emma or Phil, nice, simple, factual one. Do you have a time scale yet as to when you would be looking at this area in more detail? I'm going to make the assumption it's not going to come until you've got the Welsh language paper through Cabinet, because that's going to have quite a bearing on the area. But do you have a rough time frame in which you're going to be revisiting this area for a much more comprehensive review?
Hi, thanks, Chair. We are at the moment, we're hoping that all areas will have been reviewed in the second wave, and that starts in 22, 23.
So on that basis, you are looking at this proposal as it stands. If it were approved and progressed, you're looking potentially at least a period of 2 to 3 years where it would operate as a single all through school before it goes through the full process and reforms in another form if it were to change during that process. Just think.
I've confused things there. Sorry, Councillor Pete. When I say all areas, Councillor Sandra was referring earlier to doing area reviews. And the challenge that's come today is that this proposal is in relation to 2 schools aligning or merging. The intention would be in the next wave. So this first wave takes us to 22, but in the next then set of papers beyond that, we would look at the wider area of Llanfair-Cyrion. So it picks up on the points, some of the points the councillors are raising today. We will do that across all other localities across the county. Also, the Welsh medium component that's raised, we would want to see plans from Llanfair-Cyrion by the summer.
So in that respect, allowing the time frame of the school code, this proposal as it stands would be implemented September 22. So it'll be implemented before any review of that area starts to take place. And with the timelines on the outcome of that review, the new school would have at least 2, probably 3 years operating under this model if there were changes as a result of the wider review of the catchment. I'm just trying to get a feel for whether we want to. I'm trying to get a feel for whether, if we are sending this back to Cabinet, whether we should be saying we're sending it back because we don't think the changes will deliver any benefits before there is a wider review. I think with the timeline you've just given, 3 years, probably the answer would probably be yes, there is a benefit there. I think you've given me a timeline. I'm hope others will have their own views. Hopefully that will help move the discussion on. Sorry, this is quite a challenging decision to reach, and I'm trying to help the committee and make sure we've covered everything we can. Councillor Bryn.
Unmute this time. Yeah, I don't think it's a step, but it's not a step in the right direction. It doesn't help education in Llanfair. It won't. It doesn't increase the numbers in the English stream. It doesn't increase the numbers in the Welsh stream. So the options available to those children aren't improving. There's somebody suggested that the evidence in favour of it locally was good. I'm reading the report in front of me. It says, do you agree with the current proposal to establish a new all-age school in Llanfair-Cyrion? And it came back with an answer of 52.3%. And Llanfair-Cyrion has been through this process 20 years ago. The Deputy Director for Education in 1989 was a TAV Evans, and he told Llanfair Ceredigion, if you don't accept pupils from Newtown, the Welsh school in Newtown, then we'll have to consider the options of closing Llanfair Ceredigion. And that was back in 1989. And of course, the governors quietened down and accepted the students from Ysgol Dafydd Llwyd in Newtown. And they've been coming to Llanfair Ceredigion for 20 years now. And those numbers are dwindling because they're not getting the darpariaeth provision that they need in that school. And you know, it's not the fault of the school, it's not the fault of the staff, it's not the fault of anybody. It's life, and geography doesn't help. The other question was, do you think that the council should be considering any other options for Llanfair Ceredigion instead of the proposal to establish a new all-age school? And 40% of the response, more than 40% of the response said yes, the council should be considering other options for Llanfair Ceredigion. 15% didn't know. 44% said no, you shouldn't consider another response. Well, that's perhaps not surprising, considering this is only a survey of parents with pupils in Llanfair Ceredigion school. There is an option on board. It should be, there are proposals already which have been recommended by the council, and they've been recommended by the cabinet, they've been recommended by Welsh government, and they're being ignored in this this proposal. We did there was a rapid survey last week. Last week, there was a survey of parents who sent their children to Ysgol Llanfair Ceredigion, and generally Welsh medium primary schools parents in North East Powys. It was open for 4 days. We had 257 responses to the question. Where's the question? Do you agree that the authority should prioritise establishing a designated Welsh medium secondary school within a reasonable distance for pupils in North East Powys? So I'll just read that again. Do you agree that the authority should prioritise establishing a designated Welsh medium secondary school within a reasonable distance for pupils in North East Powys? Yes or no is the question. 257 responses within 4 days, not 111 responses within 6 weeks. 257 responses within 4 days. 218 of them responded yes. 85% of them said yes, Powys should prioritise establishing a designated Welsh medium secondary school within a reasonable distance for pupils in North East Powys. 36 people, which is 14%, said no, and there were 2 invalid responses. So that is the kind of survey you get. The results of any survey can be designed to get the results you want, and the questions aren't the consultation with the parents of Llanfair Ceredigion High School, and Llanfair Ceredigion Primary School, and the surrounding schools did not ask questions that were relevant to the parents and the pupils who were concerned with the education of their kids. They were asked, do you want to join the 2 schools together or not? That was the only question. If they asked suitable questions like this one, they would get vastly different responses. So that was 85% of parents wanted the Powys County Council to prioritise setting up a dedicated Welsh medium high school.
Bryn, I think that's an interesting piece of research, but it doesn't bear any.
It does.
Impact on what we're having today.
If you don't ask the right questions in a survey, you don't get the right answers. And this
I agree with that, but I've got to say, what was the sample from? Who was it available to? What was the medium of it? How was it consulted upon? I agree with you. It's a question that could quite legitimately have been asked in the survey being put forward by the council, but
I'm sure
we haven't got the makeup of it to come through today, and I don't think it is pertinent to our deliberations at this point. It's something that is very pertinent to the discussions around the Welsh medium high school proposals that will come later, because it does show a strong degree of support for a Welsh medium school there. And I think that is a positive message. But it's not one we can really take into account today because it's not part of the constructed evidence in front of us.
If you read through the report that has been presented to us, they interpret the desire for parents to have Welsh medium education as an indication that they want this proposal to go forward, and that is a very strange conclusion to come from the question that was asked in the report that we're discussing. It is included.
I understand where you're coming from, but we're trying to narrow down where we are and what the reasons that we would wish to refer this back to cabinet to. And I can't take externally derived polling information. I'm sorry, I can't on this one. I understand the concerns, and it is something that definitely needs to be explored. But I can't take it in this occasion.
I agree. It would be, they should consider their own policies, which they have recommended.
And that is something that we can take on board. And if we decide to refer it back, that would be one of the grounds that we potentially would be referring it back upon. Emma, do you still want to come in? Or
yeah, just to say, thanks for that. Yeah, there were, Councillor Bryn is correct in terms of the number of responses that were received in the consultation report that's referred to in the cabinet paper. That consultation report has to be published. I appreciate the more recent figures was something completely separate. But I think at the same time, when we issue any formal consultation, obviously we can't force people to complete it, but the consultation was there for everyone to access. It was publicised, and so there was the opportunity. So we have to present the findings based on what we received, obviously, as officers. I think we just need to be very careful that in terms of the messaging, really, Chair, because whilst Councillor Bryn is referring to the Welsh medium provision and whether it is or isn't if I say the volume in terms of curriculum offer that some children want, there is a choice there, and the alternative, if there wasn't Llanfair Corinion in the absence of a Welsh medium specific school being built right now, because it won't happen overnight, these things take years to build, as we know, would be nothing. And is that what we want for the children? So I have to put thinking about the children here, that surely access to Welsh medium provision, even if it's in part rather than the full offer that one would hope, is better than nothing. That said, we absolutely should be striving for strengthening the Welsh medium provision, and that's for another day in terms of the other papers that Councillor Phil was referring to. So the reason I'm making that point is just to be very careful with some of the things that have been said here, that in terms of unintended consequences or how it could be perceived. I don't think Councillor Bryn is suggesting that for 1 minute, but I could see how it could be interpreted in such a way.
Thanks, Emma. Does anyone have any new comments or any contribution to the discussion at this point? Okay, in which case I'm going to go back and I'm going to take this in a planning style. If we are going to refer this back to cabinet, can I have some specific reasons put forward as to the reasons we would be sending it back to them to ask again. Not discussion, I want the specific reasons. We can work on the exact wording after the meeting, but I want to have a list of reasons to refer it back, so that we understand what we are referring back, if that is what we are going to go forward with. I notice when you've come on, so you're now going to tell me I'm coming completely the wrong way about this procedurally.
No, Chair, I was going to say you've actually covered a lot of this in the discussion. We've got a number of points that I've been recording here, which is about giving schools more certainty. So it's about accepting that this is part of a longer continuum. Can't see the educational benefits to the school. And I've got a number of these already set out, which I've been recording as people are asking the questions in the latter part of the discussion. So I've got those. If you want me to go, I don't know if do you want me to go through them?
Could you read those through? And they basically, subject to rewording so that it's not in note form, this would comprise the referral back to Cabinet for discussion. This would form the reasons that we would be giving, and then we will vote on whether we wish to refer it back with those as reasons.
Okay, Chair. So starting from the top, then we've got giving schools a little more certainty than being a stopgap. Can't see the short-term benefit of the decision are not beneficial to the school. Not helping staffing and pupils. Not educationally helpful. So we've had to recognise that it is a step. Concern that this isn't actually wider. There's also concern about the deficit to be written off, and that this decision ought to be wider than just the two schools. Proposal isn't substantial enough. I know that was one point that was raised. But then you did say latterly that there may be some benefits because of the second wave, considering the full review. There may be some benefits, but again, that's probably negates one of the points that was raised. I think that sort of covers it, Chair.
Okay, I think in terms of headlines, there is enough there that if we vote to refer this back, that I can work with Wynne to get an appropriate wording, even if we have to refer back to some of the conversation and recording. And I think that touches on most of what we would be referring back. I think there's also what wasn't touched upon there fully is concerns about how this integrates with the WESP in some detail. I think that would have to be added in there because it was something that we raised quite significantly in the main meeting, but haven't touched on quite as much during this one. Unless anyone has anything specific that they've identified that Wynne hasn't touched on as a broad heading, I'm going to suggest we move to the vote now. So I'll just give you a quick minute. Margaret, you want to come in?
Not for that, Pete, but to say what exactly you put you put an idea of a letter to go with. So what would, because of the time frame we established, I think that needs a little bit more exploring, but maybe it's only me feels that.
If we decide we don't want to refer this back to Cabinet, I was then going to come back to committee and ask if they want Wynne and I to prepare a formal letter to send to Cabinet outlining both our concerns and how the process can be improved in the bigger picture. I was going to send a couple of observations back. For example, the one that Emma said they would look into around a Zoom, an online meeting for people outside of the immediate schools concerned in similar circumstances. But I will be, if we decide not to refer back, I will be looking again to the committee to decide whether we wish to write a formal letter outlining these concerns for Cabinet to be mindful of. Does anyone have any other comments? In which case, Wynne, if you would like to put that vote up.
Will do, Chair. Should appear on your screen any moment now.
Just for information, I think maybe everybody in the call has had that rather than just the scrutiny committee. I know it might not matter that now, but I'm just saying so you know for future in case it does become a problem.
No, it's one of the things, Councillor Phil, I can't restrict to certain people. I've not found a way of doing it as yet, but yes, good point though. No 11 people have voted, Chair.
I haven't, don't worry.
Good.
You'd be voting yes just to wind everyone up, Phil. I believe we only have 11 of the members of the committee still on the call, so I think that is everyone. Can someone confirm?
10, 11.
Okay,
12, 13 I've got, according to me. Some may not have voted.
I don't think 13 of us are here. I know Councillor Gwynfor has
gone.
left.
Beg your pardon. Yes, you may be right. Just trying to count for the bottom one.
I count 11.
Yeah, it is 11. Beg your pardon, Chair.
Okay.
Okay, you've got a result, Chair, which is 11 voted, 6 yes, 5 no.
Okay. In which case the referral back will go to Cabinet. Is the appropriate manner now, Wynne, for you to draft something which I will review and we will share with the committee and then send back?
Yes, Chair, it's got to go back to, I understand, the Cabinet meeting on the 9th.
Okay, so we need to get this done ideally in the next 24 hours so that it can go out with the agenda.
Yes.
Okay, so if members can expect to see something in their inboxes just after lunch tomorrow, is that sufficient time, Wynne?
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I'll do my best to get it out by then.
And I know I've got one meeting in the morning, which is in my diary, but I'll be available for you to.
Okay. I've actually got a meeting as well in most of the morning, so it may be, should we say, by the end of the day tomorrow. And I say if he has to go, I'll talk to Steve about when we get the document ready for Cabinet.
Okay.
Pete, I'm going to have to leave, Pete, I'm afraid.
Thank you for staying, Martin.
That's okay, no problem. Just one of those days. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Yeah. So we'll look to have something completed by close of business tomorrow, and it may have to be published on Wednesday as a supplementary agenda.
Yes.
Clive, as monitoring office, is that likely to be acceptable?
Yes, it will be, Chair.
Thank you. And I know a few people will be having 5 o'clock meetings, so if you do have to go, thank you for your attendance today, and sorry to have kept you for quite as long as we have. In which case, with that call in being sent back, thank you for your time today. When I don't think we have any other business today, but do you want to update us on when we are next due to meet?
I will do, Chair. Bear with me. The next meeting of the committee is on the 26th of the month.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you for those outside the meeting who are watching. Thank you for your patience as we sorted out technical problems at the start, and thank you to our translator for their services today. And with that, I wish you a pleasant evening and look forward to seeing you at a meeting fairly